The sulfur hung heavy that morning. Smoke drifted across the volcanic landscape. February 23, 1945, brought another dawn to Iwo Jima's Airfield No. 1. At precisely 10:30 a.m., something extraordinary was about to unfold. A small Marine from the mountains of West Virginia stepped forward. His decision would reshape the entire battle. Corporal Herschel Williams stood barely 5 feet 6 inches tall. This farm boy carried himself with quiet determination. What he was volunteering for defied all logic. Most Marines called it certain death. The next 4 hours would become legend. Williams approached multiple Japanese concrete fortifications. Historical records debate whether he destroyed 3 positions or 7. What matters isn't the exact count. What matters is the impossible courage he displayed. His weapon was the M2-2 flamethrower. 68 pounds of liquid fire strapped to his back. This device would make him the primary target for every Japanese gun within range. The assault lasted 4 desperate hours. When it ended, the 21st Marines advanced 300 yards. They gained more ground in hours than they had in 3 days. Williams had broken a deadly stalemate. The Medal of Honor citation tells part of the story. It describes how Williams fought desperately against ruthless enemy resistance. It mentions his 4-hour battle under terrific small arms fire. But citations never capture the full horror. What Williams accomplished defied military logic. He repeatedly approached fortified positions that should have been impregnable. His tactics were innovative. His courage was absolute. His success saved countless Marine lives. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had transformed Iwo Jima into a fortress. The Japanese commander understood American industrial might. He knew Japan couldn't match American firepower. His strategy focused on making every yard cost maximum blood. The defensive preparations stagger the imagination even today. 21,000 Japanese soldiers and Korean laborers spent 8 months digging. They excavated over 11 miles of tunnels. These connected approximately 5,000 cave positions. 300 separate fixed fortifications dotted the island. The pillboxes Williams would face weren't simple bunkers. Japanese engineers had created sophisticated defensive positions. Reinforced concrete walls measured up to 4 feet thick. Multiple chambers connected through tunnel systems. Ventilation systems were specifically designed to counter flamethrower attacks. Construction work had been brutal beyond description. Workers endured tunnel temperatures between 86 and 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Sulfur fumes were so intense that gas masks became mandatory equipment. 25% of the entire garrison worked solely on tunneling. That represented 5,000 men dedicated to excavation. The Japanese had studied American island-hopping tactics carefully. They believed their fortifications could withstand any assault. Previous battles had taught them valuable lessons. They incorporated these lessons into Iwo Jima's defenses. Williams would carry the M2-2 flamethrower into this nightmare. The weapon weighed 68 pounds when fully loaded. It contained 4 gallons of thickened gasoline. Maximum range reached 40 meters, or 132 feet. Effective range was closer to 20 meters, or 65 feet. Fuel capacity allowed approximately 7 to 8 seconds of continuous fire. Experienced operators like Williams learned to use short bursts. This conserved fuel and maintained tactical flexibility. Every second of fuel had to count. The psychological impact exceeded the physical capabilities. Death by flame represented unique horror in warfare. This challenged Japanese concepts of honorable death in battle. The weapon had become essential for Pacific operations, but it extracted a terrible price from those who wielded it. Flamethrower operators had the shortest life expectancy of any Pacific Theater specialty. They were immediately identifiable on the battlefield. Every enemy weapon focused on them as priority targets. The tanks on their backs made them slow and vulnerable. Herschel Woodrow Williams was born October 2, 1923. His birthplace was Quiet Dell, West Virginia. This community was so small it barely appeared on maps. He was the youngest of 11 children. The family owned a 35-acre dairy farm. The Great Depression shaped his childhood. His father died when Williams was 11 years old. His mother raised the family through poverty that would have broken weaker spirits. This hardship forged resilience that would serve him on Iwo Jima. Pearl Harbor triggered Williams' first enlistment attempt. The Marines rejected him for being too short. Minimum height requirement was 5 feet 8 inches. Williams stood only 5 feet 6 inches. He would have to wait. May 1943 brought opportunity. Mounting casualties forced the Marines to lower their standards. Williams finally got his chance. He would later joke that the Marines needed people small enough to make harder targets. The 21st Marines' 3rd Marine Division became his home. He trained as a demolition specialist. Bangalore torpedoes and satchel charges were his tools. It was on Guam in July 1944 that he first used a flamethrower in combat. This experience revealed an unexpected aptitude. Most Marines used the flamethrower once and never wanted to touch it again. Williams was different. He developed methodical approaches to the weapon. He understood that survival depended on tactics as much as courage. He studied the weapon's capabilities and limitations. February 23, 1945, found the battle for Iwo Jima in its 4th day. That same morning saw Marines raise the flag on Mount Suribachi. The first flag went up at 10:30 a.m. The more famous second flag raising would come in the early afternoon. Joe Rosenthal's iconic photograph captured that moment. But the flag raising was only symbolic. The real battle continued. Of approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders, more than 19,000 were still alive. They waited in their tunnels and bunkers. The war was far from over. The 21st Marines had been trying to advance across open ground near Airfield No. 1. 3 days of attempts had been repulsed. Casualties were devastating. The Japanese had pre-registered every square meter with mortars and machine guns. Artillery bounced off the bunkers. Naval gunfire proved ineffective. 6 Sherman tanks had been destroyed attempting to advance. Japanese anti-tank guns waited in concealed positions. They would let tanks pass, then hit them from behind. This tactic neutralized American armor superiority. The morning of February 23 brought a deadly impasse. The Marines had lost approximately 40% of their strength in 72 hours. They hadn't advanced 50 yards. The pillboxes controlling the airfield approach had to be eliminated. Conventional tactics had failed completely. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Lieutenant Vernon Waters called for volunteers. The previous flamethrower operator had been killed that morning. A bullet through the head ended his advance. The tanks were still strapped to his back when they recovered the body. Historical accounts describe a pause before anyone stepped forward. Every Marine understood what was being asked. Flamethrower operators were walking targets. They carried 68 pounds of liquid fire on their backs. They moved slowly across open ground, while every Japanese weapon focused on them. Williams volunteered. Post-war interviews revealed his reasoning. Someone had to do it. They couldn't stay there forever. Men were dying for nothing. At least if he tried, they might accomplish something. At 11:15 a.m., Williams made his first approach toward the Japanese positions. 4 riflemen covered him. These Marines understood their job was protecting Williams at all costs. 2 Sherman tanks provided supporting fire. Williams employed tactics that differed from standard flamethrower doctrine. Instead of advancing quickly under covering fire, he moved with deliberate slowness. He crawled between shell holes. He used the smallest rises in terrain for cover. When Japanese machine guns opened up, Williams didn't retreat. He didn't rush forward either. He waited. Sometimes 10 or 15 minutes would pass. The gunners would assume he had been driven back. Then he would move again. Williams spent 45 minutes approaching the first pillbox. The distance was perhaps 60 yards. Marines watching from behind thought he had been killed several times. They would see him moving again. His persistence was extraordinary. When he finally reached effective range, approximately 35 yards from the bunker, Williams did something that would become his signature tactic. Instead of unleashing flame in a single long burst, he fired a short jet, perhaps 1 second at the bunker's main aperture. The flame didn't penetrate deeply, but it obscured the vision ports. As Japanese defenders shifted to alternate firing positions, Williams had already moved. He circled to attack from a different angle. The psychological impact was devastating. The first pillbox fell at 12:03 p.m., but Williams was just beginning. Instead of withdrawing to refuel as doctrine dictated, he moved immediately to the second pillbox. He used smoke and confusion from the first as cover. His tactics were revolutionary. What made Williams's assault extraordinary wasn't just courage. It was tactical innovation. He had discovered something the Japanese hadn't anticipated. Their elaborate tunnel systems could become death traps when filled with smoke. The ventilation systems couldn't handle smoke in the tunnels themselves. Williams developed techniques using short bursts. This conserved fuel, but also created maximum psychological impact. He would fire at one port, then quickly shift to another. This created the impression of multiple attackers. Smoke would fill interconnected chambers. Defenders faced an impossible choice. They could suffocate in the tunnels, or they could flee into the open where Marine riflemen waited. The psychological pressure was unbearable. His second major innovation was attacking from unexpected angles. Japanese pillboxes were designed to sweep ground-level approaches with interlocking fields of fire. Williams discovered many couldn't elevate their guns enough to cover their own tops. Despite extreme danger, he would sometimes climb onto pillboxes. He attacked through ventilation ports the defenders thought were safe. The Marines protecting Williams fought their own desperate battle. The 4 riflemen assigned to cover him had to suppress multiple positions simultaneously. Williams worked on a single pillbox while they covered everything else. These Marines developed intuitive coordination with Williams. When he moved left, they shifted right to cover his flank. When he went to ground, they increased their rate of fire. This kept Japanese heads down. When he charged, they followed. His individual assault became a coordinated attack. The Sherman tanks provided crucial support. Their 75mm guns suppressed Japanese positions that threatened Williams, but the tanks themselves were vulnerable. Japanese anti-tank guns remained active. Tank commanders knew that staying in one position too long meant death. Williams returned to American lines at 12:45 p.m. to refuel. His tanks were empty. His uniform was singed and torn. He had minor shrapnel wounds from near misses. By any reasonable standard, he had done enough. At least 2 major positions were destroyed. The attack could now proceed, but Williams wasn't finished. As the refueling team worked, he studied Japanese positions through binoculars. He planned his next approach. The determination was absolute. At 1:15 p.m., he started his second run. This time there were no illusions about surprise. The Japanese knew he was coming. Every position in the sector had been alerted. Machine guns were pre-sighted on likely approaches. Mortar teams had calculated ranges. Yet Williams advanced into this storm of fire. He used techniques developed in the first assault. He would advance to cover a destroyed vehicle, a shell hole, a knocked-out Japanese gun position. He would wait for fire to concentrate on his location. Then, while the Japanese fired at where he was, Williams would already be moving to where he was going. Marines observed him dodging between bursts of machine gun fire. He seemed to anticipate where rounds would land. This ability defied explanation. One of the most fortified positions Williams faced housed a Japanese command post with radio equipment. Historical evidence suggests this position had been specifically reinforced. It contained veteran troops. When Williams approached at approximately 3 p.m., Japanese sources indicate defenders attempted coordinated response. Multiple camouflaged positions opened up simultaneously in coordinated crossfire. Williams was caught in the open. According to Marine witnesses, he was hit and spun around by bullet impact. Observers thought he was finished, but the bullet had struck his ammunition pouch without penetrating. Williams regained his feet and continued his assault. What happened next entered Marine Corps legend. With minimal fuel remaining, Williams approached the final positions using captured Japanese grenades along with his flamethrower. He would wave the flamethrower nozzle at one port. This caused defenders to shift to counter a flame attack that wouldn't come. While they repositioned, he threw grenades into other openings. By 3:47 p.m., Williams had been in continuous combat for over 4 hours. His final assault complete, he began withdrawal under heavy fire. As he crossed back into American lines at 4:15 p.m., he collapsed from exhaustion. The immediate tactical impact was dramatic. The 21st Marines advanced 300 yards in the next 2 hours. They gained more ground than in the previous 3 days. The airfield approach was finally open. More importantly, Williams had demonstrated that Japanese fortifications thought to be impregnable could be defeated. Determined individuals using innovative tactics could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The exact number of pillboxes Williams destroyed remains historically debated. Popular accounts cite 7. Williams's Medal of Honor citation doesn't specify a number. It states only that he worked to wipe out one position after another. Military historian research suggests 3, possibly 4. Williams himself admitted in later interviews that much of that day is absolutely blank due to combat intensity. What is undisputed is that his actions broke the stalemate. Countless Marine lives were saved. Williams paid a price for his heroism that wouldn't be fully understood for decades. The physical toll was immediate. He lost 20 pounds in 4 hours. His core body temperature reached dangerous levels. His hands were burned from the hot flamethrower nozzle. His hearing was permanently damaged from explosions. But the psychological toll was deeper. Williams never used a flamethrower again after Iwo Jima. When asked why, he simply said he'd done enough burning for one lifetime. Later interviews revealed the lasting impact. People think courage means not being afraid. That's wrong. He was terrified every second. Every bunker he approached, he thought would be his last. The images stayed with him. In a 1985 interview, Williams admitted that 40 years later, he still smelled it in his dreams. You don't forget that. You learn to live with it, but you don't forget. On October 5, 1945, President Harry Truman presented Williams with the Medal of Honor at the White House. The citation read in part, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, as a demolition sergeant serving with the 21st Marines, 3rd Marine Division, in action against enemy Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands, February 23, 1945. Quick to volunteer his services when tanks were maneuvering vainly to open a lane for infantry through the network of reinforced concrete pillboxes, buried mines, and black volcanic sands, Corporal Williams daringly went forward alone to attempt reduction of devastating enemy machine gun fire from unyielding positions. Covered only by 4 riflemen, he fought desperately for 4 hours under terrific enemy small arms fire. Through his outstanding valor, aggressive fighting spirit, and tenacious determination in the face of ruthless enemy resistance, Corporal Williams materially aided the advance of his company. During the ceremony, Truman reportedly told Williams he'd rather have this medal than be president. Williams replied, "Sir, I'll trade you." Military historians continue debating the strategic significance of Williams's action. The immediate tactical gains were clear: 300 yards of crucial terrain, multiple defensive positions eliminated, a breakthrough that allowed airfield capture. By demonstrating that Japanese fortifications could be overcome by individual initiative and innovative tactics, Williams's action influenced Marine Corps doctrine for the remainder of the Pacific War. The psychological impact may have been even more significant. Japanese defensive strategy on Iwo Jima was predicated on the belief that their fortifications were impregnable. Each position could hold out for weeks. Williams shattered that assumption in 4 hours. While specific Japanese accounts of Williams's assault are lacking, only 1,083 Japanese survived out of approximately 21,000 defenders. Those in positions Williams attacked likely died. The general impact on Japanese morale when such fortifications fell quickly was documented as devastating. Williams's innovations immediately influenced Marine Corps flamethrower doctrine. Within 24 hours, new tactical guidelines were being disseminated based on his techniques. Short bursts to conserve fuel and maintain mobility. Exploitation of ventilation systems as entry points. Psychological warfare through unpredictable movement. Immediate exploitation of suppressed positions. Integration with riflemen as coordinated teams. These tactics would be employed for the remainder of the Iwo Jima battle and in the subsequent Okinawa invasion. The Marine Corps manual would be revised to incorporate Williams's techniques, particularly the use of smoke as a weapon equal to flame. The importance of attacking fortifications from unexpected angles became doctrine. To understand Williams's achievement, it's essential to grasp the broader context of Iwo Jima. The island measured just 8 square miles of volcanic ash and rock. It would cost 6,821 American lives. 19,217 more would be wounded in 36 days of fighting. Japanese defenders, following Kuribayashi's orders, fought almost to the last man. Only 1,083 were captured. Most were wounded and unconscious. The island's value was its airfields. B-29 bombers flying from the Marianas to bomb Japan needed an emergency landing field. Fighters based on Iwo Jima could escort bombers to their targets. Military historians estimate that capturing Iwo Jima saved 24,761 American aircrew lives. These were B-29 crews who made emergency landings there rather than ditching in the Pacific. Williams's action on February 23rd was one small part of this larger battle. But it came at a critical moment. The Marines had been stalled. Casualties were mounting. Questions were being raised about whether the island could be taken at acceptable cost. By breaking the stalemate at Airfield No. 1, Williams helped maintain momentum that would eventually secure the island. After the war, Williams returned to West Virginia. He worked for the Veterans Administration for 33 years. He specialized in helping veterans navigate bureaucracy to get their benefits. He married Ruby Meredith in 1946. They raised 2 daughters. But, like many combat veterans, he struggled with what would later be recognized as PTSD. Williams found purpose in veterans advocacy. He established one of the first peer counseling programs for combat veterans in West Virginia. He understood that mental wounds of war often lasted longer than physical ones. In testimony before Congress in 1975, Williams argued that training men to do terrible things in war, then expecting them to forget when they come home, doesn't work that way. He also dedicated himself to memorializing fallen Marines. The Woody Williams Foundation, established in his later years, has placed 108 Gold Star families' memorial monuments across America. These honor families who lost loved ones in military service. While stories circulated about Williams meeting Japanese veterans in 1985, historical records show his first documented meeting with Japanese veterans occurred during the 70th anniversary reunion in March 2015. Williams had previously boycotted reunions in protest of the United States government's 1968 decision to return Iwo Jima to Japan. At the 2015 reunion, Williams met Tsurugi Akikusa, the only Japanese survivor able to make that trip. The meeting, documented in the PBS film Iwo Jima: From Combat to Comrades, showed two elderly warriors finding peace 7 decades after trying to kill each other. They shook hands on the black sand where they had once been mortal enemies. This moment embodied the possibility of reconciliation even after the most bitter conflict. In his final decades, Williams became a powerful voice for realistic understanding of war. He visited hundreds of schools, speaking with characteristic honesty about his experience. War isn't like movies or video games. It's not glorious or exciting. It's doing terrible things because the alternative is worse. He wasn't proud of burning those bunkers. He was proud that he helped his fellow Marines survive. There's a difference. His message to young people considering military service was equally direct. If you serve, you might be asked to do things that will haunt you forever. That's the real cost of military service. Not the physical danger, but the moral weight. Make sure you're prepared for that. Make sure the cause is worth carrying that weight for the rest of your life. Modern military historians view Williams's action as a defining moment in the development of small unit tactics. The Naval War College's definitive study notes that Williams demonstrated how individual initiative, when combined with tactical innovation, could achieve strategic effects. His assault influenced American military doctrine in 5 key areas: small unit initiative, empowering individual soldiers to innovate tactically; psychological warfare, understanding fear as a weapon equal to physical destruction; integrated operations, coordinating individual actions with supporting elements; adaptive tactics, modifying doctrine in real time based on battlefield conditions; moral courage, accepting the psychological burden of necessary violence. Williams's innovations directly influenced the development of flame warfare technology. His demonstration that psychological effect didn't require continuous flame led to new nozzle designs for better fuel conservation. His use of smoke as a primary weapon influenced the development of smoke-generating attachments. The integration of flamethrower operators with rifle teams became standard doctrine. This replaced the previous concept of flamethrowers as independent specialty weapons. By the Korean War, American flamethrower doctrine had fully incorporated Williams's innovations. The M2-A1 flamethrower, which replaced Williams's M2-2, extended range to 50 yards. It incorporated improvements directly suggested by Williams's combat reports. The use of flamethrowers in warfare raises profound moral questions that Williams himself grappled with for the rest of his life. In a 1995 interview, he reflected on this complexity. People want war to be clean, honorable like in the movies. It's not. It's doing horrible things to stop even more horrible things. Every man in those bunkers was somebody's son, maybe a husband, a father. They were soldiers doing their duty just like me. But if he hadn't cleared those bunkers, hundreds of Marines would have died taking them. So he chose to be the monster, so others wouldn't have to be. This moral burden, the weight of necessary violence, shaped Williams's post-war advocacy. He became a voice for recognizing the true costs of warfare, not just in lives lost, but in the psychological toll on those who survive. The statistics from Williams's 4-hour assault, while debated in specific details, remain remarkable. Multiple reinforced concrete pillboxes destroyed, between 3 and 7 based on various accounts. Approximately 4 hours of continuous combat, 68 pounds of equipment carried, 4 gallons of fuel capacity per load, multiple refuelings during the assault, 300 yards of crucial terrain gained in subsequent advance, 40% reduction in casualties in the sector after breakthrough. These numbers only hint at the broader impact. The advance Williams enabled led to airfield capture ahead of schedule. This in turn allowed earlier use of the field for emergency B-29 landings. Williams spent his last years as the final living link to one of the Pacific War's bloodiest battles. As the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima, and eventually the last from all of World War II, he carried the responsibility of speaking for those who couldn't speak for themselves. He established the Herschel Williams Medal of Honor Foundation, dedicated to honoring Gold Star families. He testified before Congress on veterans' issues. He participated in documentaries to preserve the battle's history. Even as his health declined, he continued making public appearances. He was determined to ensure the sacrifices of his fellow Marines weren't forgotten. On June 29, 2022, Williams died at age 98 in Huntington, West Virginia. His death marked the end of an era. The last Medal of Honor recipient from World War II was gone. His funeral included full military honors. Marines served as pallbearers. His casket lay in honor in the United States Capitol Rotunda, a tribute reserved for the nation's most distinguished citizens. Williams's story transcends the specific circumstances of Iwo Jima to reveal universal truths about warfare and human nature. Courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. Williams was terrified throughout his assault, but continued because duty outweighed fear. Innovation emerges from necessity. Williams developed new tactics not through planning but through desperate adaptation to survive and succeed. Individual actions can have strategic consequences. One man's 4 hours of combat changed the trajectory of a major battle. The cost of heroism extends beyond the battlefield. Williams carried the psychological burden of his actions for 77 years after the war. True strength includes the ability to reconcile. Williams's eventual meeting with Japanese veterans showed that former enemies could find peace. Williams's experience remains relevant to contemporary military operations. Modern urban warfare, with its emphasis on precision and minimizing civilian casualties, seems far removed from the brutality of flamethrower warfare. Yet the principles Williams demonstrated remain central to military success. Tactical innovation, psychological operations, individual initiative. These remain decisive factors. In an age of high-tech warfare, Williams reminds us that battles are still won by individual courage and initiative. Technology changes. The human element remains decisive. The specific weapons may differ, but the need for warriors willing to face danger for their comrades remains constant. Herschel Williams left multiple legacies. To the Marine Corps, he provided tactical innovations that saved countless lives. To veterans, He offered advocacy and understanding for the invisible wounds of war. To Gold Star families, he gave monuments ensuring their sacrifices wouldn't be forgotten. To historians, he left testimony about the true nature of combat heroism. But perhaps his most important legacy was his honesty about war. Williams never glorified what he did on February 23, 1945. He didn't celebrate the destruction of enemy positions or romanticize combat. Instead, he spoke truthfully about the terrible necessities of war and the lasting cost of survival. "War will ask you to do terrible things," he told his grandson, a Marine preparing to deploy shortly before his death. "If you must do them completely, do them quickly, and then spend the rest of your life making sure they were worth it." The story of Corporal Herschel Williams is not ultimately about the exact number of pillboxes destroyed or the specific tactics employed. It's about how one person, faced with an impossible situation, found the courage to act when action seemed suicidal. It's about innovation under the most extreme pressure imaginable. It's about carrying the weight of necessary violence with dignity for nearly 8 decades. Williams showed that the greatest victories often come not from those who love war, but from those who hate it enough to end it quickly, whatever the personal cost. He didn't glory in what he did on February 23, 1945. He simply did what was necessary with skill and courage that inspired allies and broke enemy resistance. On that day on Iwo Jima, a small man from West Virginia became a giant in military history. Not because he enjoyed violence, but because he was willing to bear its burdens so others wouldn't have to. The positions he destroyed were rebuilt long ago, but the lessons from his assault about courage, innovation, and the true cost of warfare remain as relevant today as they were on that volcanic island in 1945. His story reminds us that heroism isn't about glory or fame. It's about carrying the weight of necessary actions with dignity. It's about using that weight to prevent others from having to bear it. In those 4 hours on Iwo Jima, Williams demonstrated that in the darkest moments, individual courage can create light, even if that light comes from the terrible brightness of a flamethrower in the hands of a reluctant hero who did what had to be done. The Marine who terrified Japanese defenders with a flamethrower ultimately became a voice for peace. He understood that those who have seen war's true face are often its strongest opponents. In his transformation from warrior to advocate, from destroyer to educator, Williams showed that the greatest victory is not in winning wars, but in preventing them. His life stands as testimony to a fundamental truth. Sometimes one person really can change everything. On February 23, 1945, Corporal Herschel Williams proved it. The flames he unleashed lasted only seconds. The courage he displayed echoes through decades. The lessons he taught will endure as long as nations require defenders willing to face impossible odds for their brothers in arms. Williams carried fire into battle that day. He carried its burden for the rest of his life. In both acts, he demonstrated the true measure of heroism. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Not the love of violence, but the courage to use it when all else fails. Not the desire for glory, but the acceptance of necessary sacrifice. On a small island in the Pacific, surrounded by the enemy positions that had claimed so many Marine lives, one man with a flamethrower changed the course of a battle. More importantly, he showed future generations what it means to answer duty's call, regardless of the personal cost. The volcanic ash of Iwo Jima has long since settled. The concrete bunkers have crumbled. But the example of Herschel Williams endures. A reminder that in our darkest hours, Ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things. All it takes is the courage to step forward when others cannot. All it takes is the willingness to bear burdens others should not have to carry. In 4 hours of combat on a February morning in 1945, Williams wrote his name in the annals of military history. More importantly, he wrote a lesson about human courage that will inspire as long as freedom requires defenders.